abbreviated, and they have
Coffee and a morning Coke in the afternoon.
triennial Torah reading. The main difference is they provide their own music.
They do their self, yeah.
Yeah. He's saying this.
So the next class is gonna be on the 9th, January 9th?
January 9th, that's the next class.
Wow.
I know. Will people remember us?
The whole year away.
Okay, Rabbi,
We get reminders.
Okay, what?
before we get started,
Gotta
with
shift
the
gears.
thought we had before about why they hate the Jews.
I don't want to keep that discussion going now.
Why?
I really, you know,
We're changing
it
gears.
was a little off topic.
Okay.
Changing.
Well, all I can say is you look at the news now and every place you go, you find something the Jews are involved with, which is not nice. They would say,
Let
possibly.
me, just to give you a counter message, because I'm not taking back anything I said, but let me give you a different view. There's a wonderful midrash that has to do with anti-Semitism.
You're kidding.
Because who's the classical anti-Semite in the Torah?
Esau.
Amalek is the classical anti-Semite, right?
And there's Amalek in every generation.
Yes, Amalek in every generation, but in a comment, you know, there are two different ways of saying, you know, that you shall blot out the memory of Amalek, because there's two different passages, one in Exodus, one in Deuteronomy, in Parshat Kitei say. Right? So the rabbis trying to address that, they say there's two expressions because there's two kinds of anti-Semites. Two kinds. Echad domel lizvuv, echad domel lakelev. One of them is like a fly, and one of them is like a dog. Right? Now, when an anti-Semite is like a dog, meaning, you know, it's a mad dog, right? What are you going to do with a mad dog? That's right. You know, you can't go pet it and say, nice doggy, come like me. You know, it's not going to happen, right? The only one thing you can do with a mad dog. But flies only come around where there is filth. Filth, right? And the moral of the story is we need to make sure that we have our act cleaned up. Right? Jerry, you heard me talking to you? Okay.
No, I
Have
just.
you cleaned up your act?
Of course.
Okay, good. Then that's it. That's the whole story.
That's it.
And now we go back to Jeremiah. And I gave you a very unhappy portrait of Jeremiah because he's really unhappy. But the thing I want you to remember about Jeremiah also is how much he cares about Israel and the way he transitions after the destruction of the temple. He transitions from denunciation to hope. And he says, you know what, you're coming back here, guys. Don't give up hope, because you will come back. I want to share with you this passage from chapter 24. This is, you know, the word of the Lord came to me, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, as with these good figs, God had showed him a vision with 2 baskets of figs, right? So will I single out for good the Judean exiles whom I have driven out from this place to the land of the Chaldeans. I will look upon them favorably, and I will bring them back to this land. I will build them and not overthrow them. I will plant them and not uproot them. And I will give them the understanding to acknowledge me, for I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God when they turn back to me with all their heart. So that's a message of hope for the future. Right? Of course, it is in the future. The situation in his day is pretty bad, but you know, And of course, even before the Babylonian invasion, it's a bad time in other ways, in all the ways that the prophets critique, right? King Jehoiakim used forced labor to build a luxurious palace for himself, right? And nobody cares about the widow and the orphan, or nobody does anything to stop murder and theft, and never mind idolatry. Jeremiah just, cannot hold back when it comes to these things. So, for him, his word was like a raging fire in my heart, shut up in my bones. I could not hold it in. I was helpless. Jeremiah, he didn't want to go talk about all that stuff, but he did.
I got a question.
Please.
To return with all their heart, does that mean like Pharaoh in Egypt got so bad, it was so,
Well, I wouldn't call that with all his heart.
no, but they had
Pharaoh
no hope.
resisted to beyond the end.
They had no hope until Moses came, and they turned with all their heart to God. And I'm using that
Well,
as an analogy.
I'm not sure that they were so turned with all their heart. I mean, it didn't take long to get to a golden calf, did it?
No, but let's get back to Jeremiah.
Yes.
He was saying to return to God with all their heart.
Yeah, so he's talking to the people who will be in exile, but who one day will return. Either they or their children or their grandchildren.
Does that mean they've been beat down so bad that they turn to God with all their heart for
Well,
redemption?
maybe not. I wouldn't put it that way. I think he would say that they needed to be humble. Right? Beating down part is optional. But in this point, of course, they didn't have that option. But when they have had time to reflect on the destruction and the exile, they will come around. That is his prayer, that is his hope, and his prediction. Yeah, Jerry.
Don't they also say that when you use the word heart in Hebrew, it also mean your mind? That's one of the main
That's
issues.
correct. Yes. The expression, lave, the word that's used for heart, right, in the Bible frequently really refers to one's inclination, right? Meaning the choices that you make, that your brain makes, right? And yes, you can be led astray, right? But you don't have to be. You can make the right choice. So anyway, the prophet has a whole different set of motivations from most of us. When we make decisions in life, usually we think about what things are going to make us happy, what college will help me advance in life, what job will give me the best opportunities. Rabbi not among them. Who do I spend my life with? When will we have children? Yeah, normal choices like that, right? The motivation for the prophet is, I have to bring the word of God to the people. And that's all that matters. That's all there is, whatever the consequences. And even when he knows that the people will not listen, that's what he's got to do. Right? Interesting passage from Jeremiah chapter 7. God says to Jeremiah, you shall say all these things to them, but they will not listen to you. You shall call to them, but they will not respond to you. Well, that's a cheery thought. I'm just going to go bat my head against the wall. Oh, that'll be fun. But God's words come to the prophet with this kind of force, and he cannot do anything else. Right? Now, the prophet is also a dissident. Right? Not every dissident is a prophet. The prophet is a dissident. The prophet doesn't think about social position and popularity and wealth and well-being and all those other choices that we were talking about a minute ago. Maybe they do think about them, but with suspicion, right? But when you get the call, that's it. That's all there is. And nothing else matters very much. God calls you, you're called for life. And you'll bring the message, and if they abuse you, well, I guess I have to take it because that comes with the job. Not every prophet suffers quite like Jeremiah does. Yeah, I mean, Moses is also a prophet, right? Moses faces rebels, but God always backs him up. You know? Moses is always in charge with the Israelites. Even when there is a crisis to his leadership, God always backs him up. Right? Even Aaron and Miriam get punished for crossing Moses. Right? And most of the prophets did not face a lynch mob. Some of them were just ignored. Some of them had very short careers. You know, some of their books are very short. Habakkuk, Malachi, Joel, right? And who's ever heard of these guys anyway, right? But it's partly because their books are very short. Obadiah is one chapter, right? You know, you can blink and miss it, right? Some of the prophets had very long periods of prophecy, like first Isaiah, like Jeremiah, like Ezekiel. Right? God seems to select his messengers from a variety of backgrounds. And what this means is we have to look at their message and not necessarily their social status. Someone does not care very much about idolatry or injustice, they're probably not very good candidates for prophecy. It's, you know, you got to be in sync with God on the matters that God calls you over. Yeah, but
Has the prophet lost free will?
it's interesting. I think, you know, the book of Jonah really is in part about that. You know? In a sense, no, because Jonah was able to run away. And in a sense, yes, because he got hauled back to the job anyway.
But if God is putting the message in your mouth and you are unable to not communicate the message, I don't even want to use the word communicate, because that's a two-way street, espouse the message.
Yes.
Have you lost free will?
Well, you know, it's a good question. I don't really have a full answer to that. But I think it's a good question, that's all. Yeah, Jerry.
Does Heschel answer it?
Not fully. I mean, he's leaving it a little bit blank like I am. But I'll think that over some more. Yeah.
Okay, I've mentioned this before. The prophet Bilham, he was the greatest prophet of the non-Jews, right? And
In the Torah.
in the Torah. But what it said was God talked to him, right? And he wouldn't go against God, right? He would go figure out a way to make the money some other way, right?
Right.
But that's what he was all into.
He was into the money.
The money, right?
Yes.
He was wealthy, but he wouldn't cross God. He wouldn't.
You know, if you're winning in the game of life, why would you take a chance at losing?
But I'm saying, I don't think we emphasize Bilham that much in comparison.
No, we don't, because, you know, he has a talking jackass. I mean,
That's pretty cool.
yeah, you know, but how seriously do you want to take a guy with a jackass that knows more than that sees more than he sees? It is.
Yeah, but I think there's a moral message in
The
it.
jackass talking.
What do you think is the moral message of it?
You know, he had a bad character in ways too. things in cooperation.
That is not the moral message,
Right.
all right?
So don't think the prophet perfect.
Well, yeah, I mean, nobody says the prophet is perfect, right? But certainly not Balaam,
Right.
right? Balaam, if anything, is, you know, the guy who sees less than his animal. So don't get this idea that Balaam is some role model for non-Jews. He's not. He's not.
Rabbi,
Yes.
is Jonah the only prophet that has gone against God?
Well, he's the only one that the Bible tells us about that. Yeah, yeah. So also we don't know during prophecy when someone really is a legitimate prophet. You know? And again, Moses was an exception to that. When Moses spoke, a pillar of cloud came down over the tent of meeting. So everybody knew that Moses was the real deal when God does that for you, right? When there's no longer a pillar of cloud, then you don't, or even a tent of meeting, right? Then you don't know for sure. So people had to decide for themselves in the moment if the prophet was a true prophet. And guess what? Most of the time, they decided wrong because it was the easy way. Because the prophet is always the guy who says, you need to change up. You need to be doing something different. Do you want to do anything different in your life at this point, Jerry? Well, oh yeah, right. You're gonna change and move into the A roof, right? Right?
It
Sure.
wouldn't be that terrible.
I know it wouldn't be terrible, but you're not doing it, right? I'm just saying, nobody really wants to change that much. You have to have a compelling reason to change. People don't want to change religions. There's a lot of people who'd be interested in Judaism if they just didn't have to make so many changes.
Yeah, it does come with a cost.
There is a, in more ways than one, there's a dollar sign attached to it too, right? Yeah, I paid to have my kids go to day school, so, I know what the dollar sign means, right? And, the energy that it involves to raise kids Jewishly, as many of you well know, right? The commitment that it takes to live a meaningful Jewish life. I mean, you have to show up for classes every Sunday, right? So, among other things, right? Among many other things. That should be the least of your problems, right? But still, right? Change is difficult and most people don't want it. And that's why when the prophet comes along and says, it's time to change, things are bad, you need to change, most people say, well, I don't want to. I don't want to. And so maybe this prophet isn't a real prophet, right? So living with injustice is very convenient, right? You don't have to worry about someone less fortunate than yourself. You can live with people taking bribes and with cheating to get ahead. If you want to bribe on a higher level, you just sacrifice animals or even turn to idols, right? Yeah, Chris, you have a question on your face.
With Jeremiah, with the prophets, the people do not like to be told they're evil or they're doing evil. And once they're doing evil, they do not want to change because of their inclination.
That's right. That's right. You were saying.
I have a question about, if you were to make a timeline from the first prophet to the last prophet, how many years, centuries are we talking about?
Let's exclude Moses from this, okay?
Include Moses.
Let's take prophecy from the time of Samuel. That's a good time. That's really the beginning of the age of prophecy in the Hebrew Bible, at any rate. So you're talking about roughly 6-7 centuries in the Hebrew Bible to the last of the prophets, Zechariah and Haggai, from, back to Samuel is a period of about 7 centuries.
So how often did God speak to a prophet to warn the Jewish people? I mean, we're talking 600 years. Was there a prophet every 50
That's
years?
an impossible question to answer because, we only have the prophecies that we have in the Hebrew Bible. Okay? We have no idea how many more there were that just didn't get written down.
It seems to me that they were constantly hitting their head against a brick wall for 600 years.
Rabbis understand that feeling very well.
Yeah.
Been there and done that. But I didn't claim to have the whole truth. I didn't claim that I was a prophet. I just said, these are the things I think we ought to focus on. And sometimes people listen and sometimes not.
But basically, over a 600-year period, very few of the prophecies came to fruition.
In other words, where people actually listened to it.
Yeah, but
That would have been fruition.
don't forget, over those 600-700 years, there were ups and downs in political stability.
Right,
and
just look at the life
economics.
of King David.
Yeah.
That's a whole up and down
No kidding.
thing right there. Yeah. This whole business of not wanting to change. I have an example that I think is it's fairly contemporary. It's one of my favorite Bob Dylan songs. Is not particularly well known, when you compare it to his classic stuff, the stuff that's commonly regarded as his classics. It's a song called Black Diamond Bay. Any of you ever heard of it?
Yes.
No.
I've heard of it. Good for you. Okay, so it portrays what happened, although it never uses the name of the country. It was an earthquake in Guatemala in the 70s. And it tells the story of people whose lives were about to be snuffed out in that moment. The last verse, however, is the one that brings the story into our lives, right? Into our shell of indifference to other people's tragedies, right? So here's the words of the last verse. I won't sing it for you, but right?
You could sing it, we wouldn't understand the words.
Yeah, right, that's also probably true. I was sitting home alone one night in LA watching old Cronkite on the 7 o'clock news. It seems there was an earthquake that left nothing but a Panama hat and a pair of old Greek shoes, to allude to some of the earlier verses. Didn't seem like much was happening, so I turned it off and went to grab another beer. Seems like every time you turn around, there's another hard luck story that you're going to hear. And there's really nothing anyone can say. I never did plan to go anyway to Black Diamond Bay. That's the end. Now, of course, there are also other things that the prophets talked against for a different reason. It wasn't always just that the people didn't want to change. It was that some of the things they were doing were more fun. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
And that's where idolatry comes in. Okay? You had the fertility cults, right? Daisy May, I just had to do it. It was for your benefit too. Right? Yeah. And when the prophet comes along to denounce all this chazarah, it's easier not to listen. We get set in our ways, we settle on our compromises, and we ignore those who tell the truth. Most of us make smaller compromises about our Judaism. And we don't follow the whole program the way we should. We're not perfect, right? So hopefully we don't compromise when it comes to the majors. We don't scam anyone. We don't fool ourselves about injustice. That's what we learned from Jeremiah, from some of the other prophets as well, even if it doesn't cost us as much as it did him. Comments or questions up to here?
So, getting back to my buddy Bill, and,
Okay,
No, don't go back to Bill.
no.
okay.
Well, I think it's relevant.
I'm sure you think it is,
But
and maybe it is,
Maybe I'm not a prophet.
maybe not. So don't go there. Okay, so other comments or questions? All right, so I want to share with, some of Heschel's comments about God's nature in prophecy. Right? So he talks about, the link between faith and prophecy. Right? This is page 277 in the initial edition. Right? This was the central endeavor of the prophet, to set forth not only a divine law, but a divine life. Not only a covenant, but also a pathos. Not eternal immutability of his being, which is a fancy way of saying, God is forever. Right? But the presence of his pathos in time, that God actually has something to say about what's going on right now. That God cares about what's going on right now. Not only absolute lordship, but also, which is like, the transcendent part of God, that God is, vastly beyond us, but also direct relatedness to man, that God is also immanent, that God is also close to each of us. God is not a point at the horizon of the mind, but is like the air that surrounds one and by which one lives. He is not a thing, but a happening. The psalmist may ask man to meditate on God's works. The prophets call upon man to consider God's inner acts. They not only sense God in history, but also history in God. A little farther along. God is alive in his regard and concern for life, for man, for righteousness. Compassionate is his concern, although the form in which it is expressed may be harsh. Man is callous and deaf to God's call. It is frequently in moments of distress that he regains ultimate understanding. He quotes a verse from Psalm 90, as you turn man to contrition and say, turn back, O children of men. God's wrath can be unbearably dreadful, yet it is but the expression and instrument of his eternal concern. In other words, it's the very fact that God's caring about all these injustices that, means that there are bad consequences for all those things, and that the prophet is the messenger for those compromises. Okay. Excuse me a moment. Ah, shoot! Continuing, right? He has a chapter here called The Meaning and Mystery of Wrath, 279 in my edition. And, talks about the nature of God, and with an eye to the Christian notion of a God of love. God is only love, right? Which is interesting when you think about how much emphasis there was in Christianity, at least until recent times, on hell. Okay? Expositors of the teachings of the prophets are prone to dwell upon passages which seem to conform to their views and predilections. Right? Everybody's got a favorite verse in Scripture, and the only problem is it's not typical. Right? The prophets, we are told, spoke of a God who stands for all the virtues we should like to see in human beings. The harsh words, the grave threats, the relentless demands, the shrieks of doom are usually disregarded. There are hurricanes in the world as well as lilies. The prophets preached justice and celebrated God's eternal love, but they also proclaimed the danger of man's presumption, the scandal of idolatry and human ruthlessness, and above all, the seriousness of divine wrath. So if you're the sort of guy that thinks, oh, God never gets mad, well, the prophets put the lie to that. Yeah, Jerry.
We read in the Shema several times a day, right, Larry? And one of the paragraphs says, if you do this, I'll give you this, if you don't do this. And it's day after day for thousands of years we've been reading that. So it looks like to me nobody's paying attention.
Well, obviously, some people are paying
Yeah.
attention, otherwise we wouldn't still be here.
Right, but I'm saying, you see the,
Yeah, well, there's always, it's always going to be a minority.
right, but that's the problem,
Well, maybe it just wouldn't be realistic to expect everybody to follow the program.
Yeah, I think that's probably more of the reality of the situation.
But I find when you read the English, and the Hebrew, that he tells you, he spells it out. You do this, you're gonna get this. You don't do this, you're gonna get this. And why are we reading it 3 times a day?
Yeah, and the problem is that many people look at some of that stuff as, a false theology. So for instance, in the second paragraph of the Shema, right, there's all this stuff about the weather, right?
Yeah.
And if you do the right things, then you'll get the rain in its time, and you'll get the corn and the oil and all the good life, right?
So everybody
Right?
says that's for Israel,
Well, no, what they say is that's bad theology, right? Because the weather doesn't come, based on your virtue, even though people may have believed that back in the time of Deuteronomy, okay? However, what they're missing is the broader message, which is the prophet's message in a way, which is that there are consequences for bad things, right? And no, it may not affect the weather. God may not bring a drought just because the people are not taking care of the widows and the orphans. But there will be consequences for that kind of society. And that, I think history bears that out too, by the way. So, but, the broader message is people have to understand there are consequences, right? If somebody is in school and they don't study, they might be able to get away with that for a while. And then you become a freshman in college, right? And then they find out, oh, I can't get away with that.
What college you're in?
I'm sure there are certain colleges that are like high school.
You are?
We used to call it Cougar High after.
Yes.
But at a certain point in any field, you're gonna hit up against that wall. And either you change course or you keep hitting a wall. And people, and most people, I think, even if they don't do it, they understand it. They understand that there are consequences. Now, if you study, you'll get better grades. And if you don't, you won't. But, we do resist some of those consequences. We do resist taking the actions that we need to, even though we may know we need to. Okay? That's tough. It's tough. Yeah. That's so he says, on the other hand, those who remained open to the message of the anger of God, to which the Bible, and particularly the prophetic writing, refers again and again, some have recoiled, others have treated it allegorically, while still others have been repelled by it. It is indeed impossible to close one's eyes to the words of the wrath of God in Scripture. the very idea that God gets angry at certain things.
Isn't that part of Kabbalistic of Kesed and Gevurah?
Chesed and Gevurah, right? So love and power or rules have to be kept in balance, right? If you, so again, the Christian message is a message of God's love, right? I mean, that's an exaggeration, but I think a fair one, okay? Well, if you only raise a child with love, or worse, or worse, right? Now, if, Joseph, here's a beautiful coat for you, because I love you, right? And you're so beautiful, you look just like your mom, so handsome. I mean beautiful, I mean handsome. That's Joseph, right? And Israel, so, yeah, that was an excess of chesed, of love, right? And I mean, for sure, you don't want to raise a child without love, or with an excess of rules and boundaries and so forth, because then they're so boxed in, and they'll live in a little box, or they'll break out of it somehow. Right? But yeah, that's to me one of the most important lessons of Kabbalah, that things have to live in balance. And so God's love and God's anger, God's boundaries, if you will, those are both important. Okay. What else would I like to talk about today? Well, let's a little more on anger. Okay? The word anger is charged with connotations of spite, recklessness, and iniquity. The biblical term, however, denotes what we call righteous indignation. Aroused by that which is considered mean, shameful, or sinful, it is impatience with evil, a motion of the soul rousing itself to curb sins. The free, voluntary nature of divine anger is expressed in the words spoken to Moses after the people worshiped the golden calf. Without Moses' consent, God's anger would not turn against the people. As a righteous judge, righteous indignation is part of him. God is as Psalm 7 says, God is a righteous judge, a God who has indignation every day. Not to show partiality is an essential attribute of a judge, but to be impartial to people, one cannot be impartial to evil. In the Bible, a judge is not merely a person who has the cognitive faculty to examine a case and pronounce a sentence. He is also a person who is pained and distressed when injustice is done. So, and then he has a passage here, 284, on the evil of indifference, right? And this resonates in Heschel's later writing again and again. There is an evil which most of us condone and are even guilty of: indifference to evil. We remain neutral, impartial, and not easily moved by the wrongs done unto other people. Indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. It is more universal, more contagious, more dangerous. A silent justification it makes possible, an evil erupting as an exception, becoming the rule, and being in turn accepted. Okay? So, this is why Heschel later on talked about certain kinds of injustice by saying that some are guilty, but all are responsible. Right? If you are indifferent to certain kinds of evil, then you become complicit. Right? Some are guilty, but all are responsible. Right? Other comments or questions before we go on? So, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on something that really isn't covered in Heschel's book, and that is the prophet Ezekiel. Okay? Very important prophet, and there is no chapter on Ezekiel in Heschel. I'm going to speculate about that later on. But we'll take a look at it. He's he's one of the most long-standing prophets.
Yes.
So, big book and lots of interesting things in it. One thing you want to know about Ezekiel, and that is he was a Kohen. And so he probably had inside knowledge of temple practices and issues. He actually goes into exile in Babylonia before the destruction of the temple. In 597, before the Common Era, so 11 years before the destruction, he was taken to Babylonia along with many other nobles. It was a preliminary exile imposed by the Babylonians for Judea's various misdeeds, maybe, not paying the tribute that had been imposed on them or whatever. So he lives through the period of the exile, but he is not present in Israel when the temple is destroyed and Jerusalem is conquered. And so all of his prophecies, which extend from 593 to about 571 before the Common Era, all of these prophecies take place outside of Israel. Now, some of the rabbis did not consider him a legitimate prophet on this count. There was a feeling that, think about what we were saying about the land before in the first class, right? That the land is so central to Judaism that prophecy cannot take place outside. Right? Once you have a state, they say, that's the place it's going to happen. Right? Psalm 137, which is written in Babylonia, kind of expresses this attitude. They say, how can we sing a song of the Lord on alien soil? Right? But not everyone agreed with that. Some people, even into medieval times, if it's the Almighty, tell him I'm busy. Some people, even into medieval times, believed that the land of Israel was the center of the world. Right? So prophecy could only exist in it or with reference to it. So Ezekiel definitely qualifies on grounds of being in reference to it. Others say, well, that's just false pride and misguided confidence and so forth. So in any case, Ezekiel kind of squeaks into the Tanakh. And one reason for this is that Israel claims that he has seen the glory of the Lord depart from the land of Israel. This is in chapters 10 and 11 of the book. Because the people are no longer worthy of God, and that's why it's being taken away from them. And in chapter 8, he talks about a number of the detestable things in the land. He says, God said to me, mortal, break through the wall. And I broke through the wall and found an entrance to the temple court. And he said to me, enter and see the vile abominations they are practicing here. I entered and looked, and there all detestable forms of creeping things and beasts, and all the fetishes of the house of Israel were depicted over the entire wall. Sounds a little creepy. Okay? So God has no choice but to reach out to someone living in exile and warn that Jerusalem will fall. Although, as we have seen, Jeremiah does that from within. Okay? The difference with Jeremiah is Jeremiah actually holds out hope that the culture of Israel will change. Okay? Ezekiel says, too late, guys. It's already, you're doomed. You're a bloody city. Your destruction is settled. That's all. Right? Now, Ezekiel is pretty brutal in some other ways, not to say weird. I mean, we'll see some weird too. His words for Jerusalem are even harsher than Jeremiah's. So I'll share with you a couple of collections. if you're, if you get queasy over this sort of thing, you can blame it on me. Chapter 5, verse 11, assuredly as I live, says the Lord God, because you defiled my sanctuary with all your detestable things and all your abominations, I in turn will shear you away and show no pity. I in turn will show no compassion. 1/3 of you shall die of pestilence or perish in your midst by famine. 1/3 shall fall by the sword around you, and I will scatter 1/3 in every direction, will unsheath the sword after them. Chapter 7, verse 4. I will show you no pity and no compassion, but I will requite you for your ways and for the abominations in your midst. You shall know that I am the Lord. Here's chapter 9. So there's this man clothed in linen with a writing case at his waist in this vision of Ezekiel. And the Lord said to him, pass through the city, through Jerusalem, put a mark on the foreheads of the men who moan and groan because of all the abominations committed in it. To the others, he said in my hearing, follow him through the city and strike. Show no pity or compassion. Kill off gray-bearded youth and maiden, women and children, but do not touch any person who bears the mark. Begin here at my sanctuary. So they begin with the elders who were in the front of the house. He said to them, defile the house and fill the courts with the slain. Then go forth. They went forth and began to kill in the city. When they were out killing and I remained alone, I flung myself on my face and cried out, O Lord God, are you going to annihilate all that is left of Israel, pouring out your fury upon Jerusalem? God said, well, the iniquities of the houses of Judah and Israel is very great. The land is full of crime, the city full of corruption. They say the Lord has forsaken the land, the Lord does not see. So I in turn will show no pity or compassion. I will give them their deserts, their just deserts. Okay? That's one they didn't teach us in Cheder, I'll tell you that. Okay? And here's another one. Okay? You remember how Hosea compared Israel to a wayward spouse like his own, like a prostitute. Okay? Here's chapter 16 of Ezekiel. And this is a long chapter. I'm going to read a good piece of it. Let me know when you've decided you've heard enough. Okay? The word of the Lord came to me. O mortal, proclaim Jerusalem's abominations to her, and say, thus said the Lord God to Jerusalem, by origin and birth you are from the land of the Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite, your mother a Hittite. As for your birth, when you were born, your navel cord was not cut, and you were not bathed in water to smooth you. You were not rubbed with salt, nor were you swaddled. No one pitied you enough to do any one of those things for you, out of compassion for you. The day you were born, you were left lying, rejected in the open field. When I passed by you and saw you wallowing in your blood, I said to you, live in spite of your blood. Yea, I said to you, live in spite of your blood. I let you grow like the plants of the field. You continued to grow up until you attained to womanhood, until your breasts became firm and your hair sprouted. You were still naked and bare when I passed by you and saw that your time for love had arrived. So I spread my robe over you and covered your nakedness. And I entered into a covenant with you by oath, declares the Lord God. Thus you became mine. I bathed you in water, washed the blood off you, anointed you with oil. I clothed you with embroidered garments and gave you sandals of leather to wear, and wound fine linen above your head and dressed you in silks. I decked you out in finery, put bracelets on your arms and a chain around your neck. I put a ring in your nose and earrings in your ears and a splendid crown on your head. You adorned yourself with gold and silver. Your apparel was of fine linen, silk, and embroidery. Your food was choice flour, honey, and oil. It grew more and more beautiful, became fit for royalty. Your beauty won you fame among the nations, for it was perfected through the splendor which I set upon you, declares the Lord God. So far, so good, right? But confident in your beauty and fame, you played the harlot. You lavished your favors on every passerby. They were his. You even took some of your cloths and made yourself tapestried platforms and fornicated on them. Not in the future, not in time to come. You took your beautiful things, made of the gold and silver that I had given you, and you made yourself phallic images and fornicated with them. You took your embroidered cloths to cover them, and you set my oil and my incense before them. The food that I had given you, the choice flour, the oil, and the honey which I had provided for you to eat, you set it before them for a pleasing odor. And so it went, declares the Lord God. You even took the sons and daughters that you bore to me and sacrificed them to those images as food, as if your harlotries were not enough. You slaughtered my children and presented them as offerings to them. In all your abominations and harlotries, you did not remember the days of your youth when you were naked and bare and lay wallowing in your blood. After all your wickedness, woe to you, declares the Lord God. You built yourself an eminence and made yourself a mound in every square. You built your mound at every crossroad, and you sullied your beauty and spread your legs to every passerby, and you multiplied your harlotries. You played the whore with your neighbors, the lustful Egyptians. You multiplied your harlotries to anger. Have you had enough yet? You think that's enough?
Yeah.
God, you get the idea. Yeah. Yeah. So, and if you want more, read chapter 23. There's a whole nother level in there. It's more of the same, maybe even more X-rated, chapter 23. Pretty explicit stuff. It's also very imaginative. Ezekiel has a very fertile imagination, sometimes just downright weird, even compared to other prophets who are not lacking in imagination. Right? He has a number of out-of-body experiences, one of which is in chapter 37. Which, if you're not familiar with it, this is the famous passage with the valley of the dry bones. Right? So you can read that on your own. It's very nice. At one point, God tells Ezekiel to eat a scroll. He tells Ezekiel to eat baked bread that's baked over cow dung. God tells him to cut his hair with a sword. Ever tried that, Jerry?
Yeah, look what happened.
Yeah, there you are. I mean, he is told in chapter 24 not to mourn the death of his wife. There's a lot of symbolism involved with all these things, but also, feelings of depression and desperation on his part. So, it's hard to say whether this is reality and, God tells him all these things, or is it fantasy, some of it? At any rate, it's very strange. And that's part of what you have to cope with when you read Ezekiel. It's full of all sorts of strange things. Comments or questions? We're at the end of our time, so.
What was the first chapter that you mentioned on Ezekiel, 137 or 135?
No, that was the Psalm 137.
Oh, okay.
Where it says, how can we sing a song of the Lord in alien soil? Yeah, it's 137. Okay, thank you all very much. We'll see you in 3 weeks.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Thank you.